is MC Fireside Chats, a weekly show featuring conversations with thought leaders, entrepreneurs, and outdoor hospitality experts who share their insights to help your business succeed. Hosted by Brian Searl, the founder and CEO of Insider Perks, empowered by insights from Modern Campground, the most innovative news source in the industry.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of MC Fireside Chats. My name is Brian Searl with Insider Perks. Super excited to have a brand new intro. This is the second week, guys, that I've had the intro, and I didn't realize how much I care but don't care about the intro, but it's nice to just change it up and have a new spicy thing, right, that we can look at with different imagery and stuff like that. It's been like a year and a half. So finally did that. I don't know if it's better or worse. Nobody needs to judge me live on air, but you can privately think that it's terrible or good. But thanks for joining us again. We're super excited to be here for our glamping focused episode, which happens the second week of every month. We've got Zach from Clockwork. We've got Connor Schwab from Sage Outdoor Hospitality, both joining us as recurring guests. And we've got two special guests. We've got Chris from, is it Monument Glamping? I'm terrible with reading notes, Chris. And he's a YouTube star, a couple million subscribers, I think, right? Working his way to a couple million subscribers, I think, is what I really wanted to say. And then we've got Vidar, did I do that right?
Yeah, that's perfect.
I butchered it 5 times before we started, but I got it right. Vidar from Nordic Glamping in the UK is going to talk a little bit about his stuff and projects that he has going on. So, Connor, you weren't here before we started the show. We just kind of jumped on briefly. We were going to talk about some of Zach's projects that he's been working on recently. He's got a bunch of people who are coming to him for all kinds of things, as I'm sure you do too. But talk a little bit about what you've got going on, Zach, and we'll lead into some of these really cool projects that Vidar and Chris have going on too.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I said, we're actually really excited. We've been extremely busy through the summer. Development seems to kind of be seasonal, right? Like everybody wants to be under construction during the spring and summer months, and so you back up from that. Plans and permitting usually in the fall, and so there's tends to be kind of peak times of the year where we get more inquiries about developing new resorts. And then there's kind of some downtime, some off time, where things slow down a little bit. We get caught up on some of our projects. And this year we didn't see a slowdown. It's been pretty sustained, 2, 3, 4 calls a week about new projects, new development, new opportunities. I've probably written more proposals in the last 2 months than I did in the previous 6 months this year. So things are definitely, ramping up, it's good. I think there's, especially sort of state of politics in the country, heading into elections soon. There's a lot of people that are somewhat more, cautious or less likely to invest in things with some of those uncertainties. And it's encouraging that at least in the outdoor hospitality, we're not seeing a slowdown. I think some of the conversations I've had with lenders, with banks, with private equity, there's still a lot of capital available for these projects. There's still a lot of faith and I guess consumer confidence in this industry. So yeah, it's been moving along very well. And I've got, folks like you, Brian, and Connor to thank. A lot of our success in this industry has been the
Connor's fault, not mine. I don't really. You blame Connor for that one.
It's our partners, right? It's all the people that we work with, and then doing a good job for our clients and delivering what we say we're going to do. So, it's been great. We, as far as like project updates, we've had 2 projects that we've recently gone through the planning and zoning piece to get either the site plans approved or special use permits approved. And both of those projects were approved. So moving forward, that's always good news in our business. And then just this week, we've signed contracts on 3 new developments, one in in California. It'll be our first project in California, which I think, over the years we've had a couple of those opportunities and kind of passed on it because of the regulatory environment in the state, kind of the anti-business, anti-development. But we finally came across a project and a group, a client that we couldn't say no to. It was just an incredible opportunity. So very excited to be starting that project. So I'll be out to visit the property and meet the owners and do kind of a kickoff this next week. And then continued interest in Georgia. We did our first project in Georgia about a year and a half ago. We just got construction permits on that, so they're underway. And a lot of continued sustained interest in the state. We've looked at 4 or 5 projects, but we just went under contract on a new project down there near Providence Canyon State Park. And then the third one, client we've been kind of working with on and off over several months, trying to find the right property. We looked at a lot of different options, came up, did a couple visits. They finally got under contract. Actually, the very first property that we looked at, the one that was kind of their dream property.
Nice.
So super excited for them that they got the land going. So we'll be starting the planning and zoning process and master plan design on that. So very excited for them that they found a place to land, and excited to move forward with them. So yeah, all good things.
It continues to amaze me just how many variables go into, like, I've been in this industry for, I don't know, like, it keeps adding a year every year, and somehow I get older, so I keep wanting to say 12, but I feel like it's been 15 now. But every year that I go into this business, you think I continually know so much stuff, right? And then you continue to talk to people like Zach and Connor and Chris and Vidar, and you just learn something new every week about how much goes into this and the development process and the permitting and the land use selection and the ebbs and flows of the business. And it's really kind of interesting to me, because I think for me, and obviously I was wrong, but for me, like a year ago, I would have told you that there's going to be some hesitancy with interest rates and stuff like that. And I don't think we're seeing that at all, because I think people can build that into their purchase prices. But I think that we're at least on the campground side, obviously not on the glamping side that you're talking about, we're seeing a pause in acquisitions temporarily because the asking price has not yet come down to what the realistic price is, given the change in interest rates and the economy and all that kind of stuff, at least in not all cases. But is that kind of what you guys are seeing? But it's just interesting to me in general, just the ebb and flow of how so many things have to converge to make everything perfect.
Yeah, I would say, I think, a lot of the work that we're doing is new ground up, new development, so greenfield sites. I think it's a little bit different looking at the acquisition model, and I think that's probably absolutely true with respect to some of those. We do have some of those projects. The other thing I think that the interest rate climate has created, we're seeing a big increase in project interest on leased land. Where somebody's coming in and saying, we're not going to drop, a couple $1 million to acquire acres of land, but we're interested in leasing this. Even on, the more massive development side, we have established real estate developers that are looking at, can I get a lease from the Corps of Engineers for a lake, or can I get a lease from a city on some underutilized park space or public lands? And I think that for a long time people were kind of scared off of the lease, and investors said, no, the real estate is the asset. That's the value. That's what we're interested in. So they weren't considering lease deals. And we've seen a lot more interest in development projects in outdoor hospitality on leased land.
Do you think that's because of the interest rate change, or that just has nothing to do with it and I'm an idiot?
No, I think
I actually got one right. I never get things right.
You're right. You're right. When you look at the model, right, the overall financial model, when you're doing your projections and things, you always have some sort of a debt payment, right? It's a loan, something that covers both the building and construction as well as the land acquisition cost. And so I think, you treat a lease payment as the same thing, right? It's a controlled cost. It's a set amount. But what it has done is, if I needed to sink, $3 million into land acquisition, and then another $3 million to build out my resort. Now, that became a $6 million project. So when interest rates were low, that was doable. Now that we're seeing interest rates approaching 10, 12, 15%, people look and say, well, gosh, if I lease the land, my operating expenses, my budgeting is the same, except I don't have the upfront $3 million purchase price of the land. I've got a controlled set amount for the next, 25 to 50 years. And they look at just as another, operating expense or a debt payment. But it keeps the upfront investment lower. Now I only am financing the build out, the construction cost of something. So when interest rates go up, we're always looking for more creative ways to still make the budget work, still make the numbers work. And not having a land acquisition cost in a development project is a big way to bring that down. Yeah.
Yeah, if I could pipe in and say something.
Yeah, I was just going to ask the glamping guy for his thought. Introduce yourself first, though, Chris, please, so they know who you are.
Oh, yeah, I'm Chris Jeub. I own Monument Glamping here in Monument, Colorado. We have 2 properties, 12 units open right now. We're in a 21-day review right now to get up to 20 units. So that's kind of where my level of glamping is. And it's going really well. And I'm in a lot of different glamping groups or little focus groups that I touch base with other glampers all over the country. And American Glamping Association is one of them. I saw you guys in the meeting just an hour ago. And the general consensus is that we're not seeing, there's an Airbnb dirge right now. All the Airbnb gurus are complaining about how Airbnb is falling apart and it's not quite the easy investment that it used to be, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of doom and gloom out there with short-term rentals. And us glampers are kind of going, we're not seeing it. I mean, we're booking out.
Because glamping's harder. Nothing should be as easy as Airbnb was in the beginning. It's ridiculous.
And
nothing like that is sustainable if it's not easy.
Yeah, that's right. Well, so anyway, glamping is going fantastic. I've got more good news than bad news. The bad news is just the general operational stuff that just goes on with the program, but it's all good. I'm having a blast here in Colorado doing what I'm doing, and I'm glad you called me the glamping guy, Brian. You're one of my on YouTube. You go to glampingguy.com and see. I'm a teacher at heart. I left teaching to do glamping full time. And that's my story. So this is my 5th season into running a glamping operation. My wife and I love it, but I feel like I'm hoarding all this awesome knowledge and awesome development. So glampingguy.com is my journal, you might say, of my blogging and vlogging journal of stuff I'm doing. I just released.
Be careful, because I thought I was that guy too, and then I started talking to smart people like Dak and Connor and realized.
Think twice about claiming to be the glamping guy, but the URL was available.
I'm sure you've got it, but I don't have it. That's all I'm saying.
Grab it.
Continue though, please. I'm sorry.
That's just. Well, here's my story, Brian, and anybody who's watching. So, in 2019. I was a teacher and I had the summers off and I owned a curriculum company on the side. And we have a beautiful piece of property that we moved into 23 years ago. But it's a fixer upper, and then we remodeled the bedroom and we moved I built a platform outside. I put my hunting tent up on the platform and moved my master bedroom outdoors. And Wendy and I loved it. I mean, we had a great time for a month and a half. Instead of sleeping in the living room, we were out there under canvas and just having a great time while we were doing this remodel. And after the remodel, we decided to put it up on Airbnb to see what would happen. We booked out the rest of the summer. I couldn't believe it. My hunting gear that's usually in storage was actually making me money. And then the next summer we put up 2 tents. And then the next summer we did 3 tents and 3 container homes. That's kind of another story where I'm in one of my container homes right now, and we started developing these things. And then that's when I started getting into trouble. We started talking about zoning and planning and all that, the building. I started getting yellow jackets in my front yard. I call them yellow jackets. They show up in your front yard wearing a yellow jacket with a badge, and they say, we're from the government, and we're here to help.
Yeah, it's really ridiculous. We should just all get together as glamping people and start our own country somewhere.
Yeah.
Like regulations on everything except glamping.
Yeah, that's right.
I think we could easily take over the UK at this point, you know, and we know that they're already friendly towards glamping, right?
They are.
We'd be able to turn enough of the existing ones to our side.
Yeah. I think the challenge is I think we are actually seeing a bit of a inflation in the market when it comes to the amount of glamping sites that's gone up over the last few years, and every landlord wants to do it because.
Well, we would just get rid of inflation for you. That would
Yeah,
be part
just
of
have
the
to get rid of
country.
inflation.
Yeah.
No, I think with because there's been massive encouragement from the government to do this, and there's actually, even though planning rules are really, really strict in the UK when it comes to houses and land use and so on, when it comes to actual glamping, it is quite easy. And a lot of landlords wants to do it because of that. And you can legally have a site up for 28 days. Well, they actually change it to 60 days now. Definitely in my county, without planning permission. You need to notify the planners so they can come and have an inspection on your site. But it's very easy to get stuff up and running if you have some gear and knowledge, obviously.
So what is Nordic Glamping? Tell us.
Nordic Glamping is basically me. It's I always
All the best things start, man, is just with you.
Yeah, it is. It's less problems, less conflicts. Anyway, I got super interested in yurt structures by reading some articles online and in a couple of magazines, and then we started looking into me and my wife, we love to travel, and she didn't like to go camping, but she was happy to go glamping. So we stayed in various yurts and various other structures. Started doing that about 8, 9 years ago, here in the UK mainly, because the scene was already pretty established here. And it was just a pleasurable way of holidaying, and I thought, no, I better start building some structures myself, because I'm pretty hands-on. I'm from a family of furniture makers, so on the west coast of Norway. So I just started it a few years back. So I do at the moment. I'm sitting in one of my yurts here. Rent them out for festivals, for weddings and events that need somewhere for people to stay. I currently don't have like big wedding yurts and stuff. That's an investment I haven't chosen to take on yet. But yeah, no, it's all pretty low key. In a conversation with various landlords about starting up sites, because as you say, interest rates and what they call it, like the cost of living crisis, we call it here in the UK, has impacted people's affordability. So that is hitting me, I would say, significantly. People rather pay like a third of a cost to rent a cheap belt tent than a yurt with a wooden floor and a wood burner. So I have to utilize my yurts in a different way, because I have a portfolio of yurts that are spending too much time sitting inside another yurt for storage. so that's kind of where we are. But yeah, so the rental market is challenging, but glamping market is still going strong. But there is a lot of sites popping up these days, so I'll be interesting to speak to a lot of my contacts by the end of a season, and at the the UK glamping show, which is in mid-September, get some updates there. That's really good show in the Midlands here in the UK. So yeah.
So Vidar, you mentioned kind of your background. Did you build your yurts, or did you source them through a supplier, and if so, who?
No, I build them all from scratch. So it's all steam bent hardwood with a heavy duty canvas from I use a supplier that has a long history of supplying like military canvas. So it's really durable stuff. It's a mix of cotton and polyester, so it feels and looks like cotton, but it's far more durable and really good stuff. Lasts for years, 10 decades. So yeah,
Do
it's
you
good stuff.
think
I do it all
Vidar,
myself.
do you think that is, because to me that is, right, from a marketing guy perspective, but also from a consumer perspective, and I know this isn't everybody, right, but that's a difference maker to me, the handmade, the quality difference in the personal touch. So have you
Yeah.
thought about, or do you already, I'm sure you do a little bit, market that way as a difference maker?
Yeah, I need to up my marketing. That's for sure. I've tried to use a company. I wasn't too happy with it, but I think I need to spend more effort. And I was quite pleased to be introduced to the YouTuber here as well. That's something I thought about, maybe doing a kind of workshop, video shots and stuff like that, to introduce people to the materials and how it's handled, how things actually come to life. So that's something I'm quite interested in.
I would
And Vidar, are
subscribe.
you doing business in Norway or in the UK?
No, I'm not doing business in Norway at the moment. It's a bit of a hurdle with the whole Brexit thing. Yeah, not at the moment.
Okay, so this is all happening in the UK, and
Yeah,
you're
no, it's
using,
not happening here.
and you're renting yurts out for temporary events. So set up, takedown in like a week or two or a couple days.
Yeah.
Wow. So you're the first person I've heard of doing temporary or like event stays with a yurt. Obviously, it's quite common with glamping bell tents.
Yeah.
But how long does it take you to set one of those up and take them down?
2 hours pitching with a wood burner, all the interior, and a wooden floor. So it's not too bad. And that's just one man. So yeah.
Wow. Are you selling the units?
Yeah, I have them for sale as well. So I am selling them. Yeah.
Okay.
Connor will take 20.
Yeah. No, it's a cool story, and I think
I'm sure we can go off with a trade deal between the UK and the US. It's in the working, I believe.
Well, and I think you having like lineage in a like West Coast Norwegian furniture making family is a really cool story.
It is.
Making sure people are aware of that.
Yeah,
it's nice to know that there's a story and a person and a craftsman behind it. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I need to get some yurts over and take some pictures of the West Coast. It's not a bad place.
It is the best place ever.
Pretty pretty the days that it doesn't rain ridiculously. So
yeah.
It's interesting though, like we talked earlier in the beginning, right, about the ebbs and flows and all the different things that go into the market. But from just a marketing standpoint too, you see that a little bit, at least I do in my world, from the ebb and flow of like, sometimes we think consumers care about the stories, sometimes we think they do. And then it kind of, and I don't know whether that follows the economy the whole time. I don't think it does. And I think we tend to just kind of overestimate the course correction that people are doing. And maybe it doesn't fluctuate as much as we think. But I for sure think that's a great story that you should embrace.
Yeah, I was just going to say that too, V. Check out Davis Tent. I buy their Davis Tent, davistent.com. I buy their tents out of Denver, and one of the reasons I go with them is because they have a lot of their story in it. Now, the Davis family, there's one Davis that still works there, but it's owned by somebody else. But the Davis family, they kept that brand because of the story, and they're mountain hunters, and they have like videos where they talk about what you talk about, the fabric and why their canvas is top of the line canvas, and they compare it to the Cabela's garbage and stuff, things like that. They have those kinds of how to lock a tent. You can lock a tent. There's a video where Chris Davis is actually showing how to lock it up, and those kinds of things. And as well as they boast about being a 50-year-old tent manufacturer. Yeah, and that story, the story element. I mean, my glampers really do appreciate to know that there's a story that they're staying in. They're staying in this campsite. I have their brochure in our welcome book and stuff, so they can see, hey, these are Davis tents out of Denver, Colorado, and that becomes part of their experience, is the story of the structure.
Well, that's the thing, and I think it always will be, right? Part of that story. So even if you go into like boutique hotels, right? I think there's a tendency sometimes from if I'm a marketer trying to reach as many people as I can at scale, that this more, I don't want to call it a niche audience, but a lesser audience of people who will go stay at a boutique hotel versus just whatever is cheaper or whatever the chain they stayed at always is, right? But I think it's a big enough audience that and I think it's growing too. Would you agree with that? I don't know if your data shows that, Connor, but I feel like boutique hotels, boutique glamping niche is growing in popularity versus the other.
Yeah, I think experiential hospitality, which is kind of tied in with a story, I think is all I've heard is good things. And I think conscious capital is becoming a big driver and eco-friendly. And I think there is always going to be customers, and maybe it's the majority of customers that are going to purchase based off price. But I think there's a growing segment who wants to put their money towards a business or a person that they feel good about.
And for sure, I think there's a balance there, right? So let's just a good example, right, is me pivoting. We said before I was going to talk to about Iceland real quick, right? So we're planning this trip, me and my girlfriend, to Iceland at the beginning of September for 2 weeks. And we're not going to go around the whole ring road because we want to drive 6 hours a day, right? We're going to take the whole kind of south coast or whatever and take our time. And so we're researching accommodations. And I don't know if anybody's too familiar with Iceland, but like Reykjavik is the main city there. And then there are tiny, tiny little cities everywhere else. But for the most part, accommodations are few and far between in the typical way that we would think of. There's a Marriott and a Hilton on every corner. And so really these chain hotels don't exist outside of that landscape. So your choices are a couple hotels here and there, or guest houses, which are like the communal like hostels, right, in Europe, or like these new glamping startups that are all over the place. And so you'll see these that have popped up in these fields in Iceland that are domes that you can look at the stars, that are unique, little cave things that are right, and all kinds of different stuff. The problem for us is when I'm talking about the middle ground, right, is I want to support boutique. I want to support small. But for one, Iceland is more expensive than everywhere else. It's one of the most expensive places in the world. But we were looking at some of these glamping accommodations. They're $900 a night versus the hotel that's really nice down the street, right, that may not be in the middle of nowhere, may not have that same experience, is $300 to $500. And that's a big gap, no matter what your income level is. So I think there's that balance that we're still struggling to find, whether it's in Iceland or the US or Canada or wherever else, between like, we want people to make money, but they're like, how much can you really support realistically out of your pocketbook, especially with an interest rate increasing, food prices, all that kind of stuff.
Well, that would go to the argument that they're charging $900 a night because they can.
Oh, sure. I'm not saying they shouldn't. I'm not saying they should lower their prices at all.
Yeah, but experiential glamping is outplaying the standard Marriotts, and that's
well, yes and no. I mean, not necessarily in Iceland, just because of the smaller cities. There's just not enough for a Marriott to exist anywhere outside of Reykjavik.
Or just a hotel, like you're saying, hotels are $300 versus experience at $900. That's that is quite the gap.
I think it's unique, right? So like if you look at like when we're traveling in these tiny towns, there's literally like 2 hotels, 4 hotels, 2 hotels. That's it. And they're 3 to 4 hours apart from each other. So I think it's a demand consequence too, of just there's not enough room.
Yeah, but to the point earlier, when we talk about experiential based hospitality, that $900 is not what you're paying for the accommodation. It's what is the experience that's being delivered with that. I can't lay in a bed in a Marriott and look up and see the Northern Lights. I'm not, greeted with some beautiful panoramic view out of a hotel window that's, this far from the building next door.
But you want
so I think
you want to go to a hotel. You want to go experience Iceland,
right? And so I think that's one of those differentiators that when we look at experiential based hospitality, that we're saying, if you're the consumer that is only looking at the price point, and I think availability and market probably ties into that a little bit as well. But if the bottom line is all that you care about, glamping will never compete with traditional hospitality. If you want the cheapest place to stay for a night, go stay in a hotel.
But you also don't want those people.
Right.
No, and we're not targeting those people.
Right.
You know, the people that have come to glamping, the people that are seeking that experience are willing to pay more for it, so long as there's a perceived value in what they're getting. You know, if somebody books that at $900 a night and shows up and it's a, you know, crappy unit with a hard bed with sheets you're not sure when the last time they were laundered, and they've got, you know, a composting toilet in the corner, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's not a premium guest experience, and their perception of value is going to look and say, gosh, you know, that was really expensive for no more than it is.
Yeah.
So I think as long as you're delivering an experience that is commensurate with your price point, and the market will dictate that, right? Like, you put that out there at $400 or $500, people see the pictures and you don't get any bookings. You're trying to exceed the value that's perceived by what you're presenting.
And let me clarify, like, I'm not suggesting that, I'm not arguing in favor of lowering prices at all. Like, more power to them.
No.
You're right, it is the experience. When we were talking about consumers, right? I think that as there becomes more of a middle ground between 400 and 500, that more consumers would be willing to support there than they would at 9. If they wanted to support a boutique hotel story type thing.
And I think part of that discussion then goes back to operations, right? Like, you could lower your price below market value and be 100% full, and you're going to be doing a lot more work to take care of it. You're going to be paying, you know, more fees, more operational costs and expenses for a lower return, a lower revenue. You know, so you know, I think especially when we approach design on glamping resorts, that's one of the reasons it's so important to be informed. It's why we look at you know, Connor's market analysis to see how many units can we support in this area, and then figure out what is the average ADR, where is that market, do we think we're above or below it with what we're delivering, and then where's that sweet spot where we're making our clients the most money in the market that they're in, with, you know, the least amount of kind of headaches from operations. So I think it's all a balance.
Do you find that that's in your research with Connor or anybody else? Do you find that that's the price point? Like, is it that high though, or is that just? I feel like that's just Iceland. Like, certainly Under Canvas has, and Collective Retreats has really nice, right, $600-700, and certainly there are some resorts that charge upwards of $1,000. But is there a number that you think is for a luxury type glamping resort that they could consistently make average wise across the states?
You know, as always, I like to say it depends.
Oh, sure. Okay, fine.
You know,
I'm trying to put you on the spot here.
I'll let Connor weigh in on the ADR discussion or the question. But what I would say is, you know, there is precedent. There are examples. You know, if we look at the model created by places like Dutton Hot Springs or the resort at Paws Up, right? Those are $2,000 to $3,000 a night. They are able to demand those higher rates because of the exclusivity of what they're creating, right? When you look at their staff to guest ratio, you know, they may have 15 or 20 guests and 60 staff to take care of them because they're delivering a premium experience. You know, you're not microwaving a cup of noodles in your tent. You're coming down and you've got a Michelin rated chef that is crafting a 3-course meal specifically for you with locally sourced ingredients. You know, anything you want to drink, they have it. And so I think it just plays back to that. What is the experience and what can you command for the experience that you're delivering?
Again, I agree. And I want to let Connor, I'll go into it in 1 second. And I agree with you. I think my thing is certainly that experience for sure commands that rate. Certainly an experience in the middle of the field next to a waterfall or a nice mountain in Iceland for sure commands that price. But how much of a market is there? Like, how many resorts can there be that charge $2,000 or $3,000 a night before the American consumer runs out of people who can afford that? Is my question.
Well, I think you could look at the hotel market as an indicator for where we might go, you know, 20 to 30 years from now, and see, you know, what percentage of hotels are 5-star or luxury. So that's probably the best looking glass we have into the future.
Okay.
In terms of, so this question is something that I spend a lot of time looking at and researching, and I actually did this for a client. because they wanted to know, what would put you over $1,000 for an ADR. And I think it's important to remember that average daily rate is truly the average of all the rates that you charge per night that year. So if you're saying that your average daily rate is over $1,000, then that means you have some that are, $1,300, $1,400 and some that are probably $800, $700, depending on seasonality and weekday versus weekend. But for something to have an ADR and across all their units, we also see, it's pretty common that a property might have, a honeymoon suite or one particularly luxury or a couple particularly luxury units or waterfront spots that are getting over $1,000. But as far as a site where across all of its glamping units, it's getting an ADR over $1,000 is probably less than 20, probably between 10 and 20 in the US right now. And usually that probably comes down to exclusivity, guest to staff ratio, are probably kind of the two biggest things. So I don't know. Does that answer your question, Brian?
I think so. I mean, I'm just trying to really prompt it and explore, the dialogue more. I'm definitely not claiming I know, because I don't. You gentlemen know way better than I do. So it's just interesting to me. That's all. Like, I'm trying to give the best advice I can to the people who are watching this show who are interested in starting glamping unit projects, or who already have and are trying to figure out, where do I go? Do I target the high end, the mid end, right?
Mm-hmm. So I'd be interested, Chris and Vidar, where are you guys at in your markets? What are you looking at? What has your guest response been? What have you found kind of different times of the year? And how has that influenced sort of how you've developed, how you've grown?
Yeah, so I would say, UK is different. Well, England and Oxfordshire, where I'm based. England, you would have typically a 5 to 6 month season for a glamping site of it with tent-based structures. You're going to struggle to get people into a damp yurt in the middle of the winter. That is for the people with an acquired taste. So that's why most people do this on a seasonal basis. Whereas I know there are high-end sites, and I've studied in some of them that do all year round, but they will have supportive structures and restaurants and enough structures and enough support structures to justify staying there midwinter when it's like 7 degrees and rainy. It's still comfortable. So there are quite a few. I don't know if you have the shepherd's hut over in the US. It's basically a box on wheels. Normally not that big. Normally like 2.5 by 5 meters structures with always with a wood burner and a double bed. That's normally what all of them have. Then they just add on with kitchens and showers and flushing toilets and so on. So some of the higher end sites here, they struggle to charge more than £250 a night. I would say there are obviously those in the market that charge more, but it's different. It's different to the high-end sites in the US, that's for sure, and Iceland. So my experience from Norway is that there are some high-end sites there, but they struggle to charge more than 3,500, 4,000 NOK a night, and that includes an on-site chef in a small environment that would cook like steaks in front of you on a grill in the middle of nowhere, and there will be hot tubs and lakes for wild swimming and so on. But there are different markets, and here glamping is pretty well established, and you can stay in a belt tent for like 70 pounds. So
it's about $100 US.
80 bucks per night.
Yeah, and if I can answer the question, this is I got so many ideas that are coming out of this discussion, because I really like the idea of experiential glamping, and I've kind of experimented with that idea. over the last 5 years. Just to give you some examples, one we had what was called a Colorado Cookout. Now I don't have a chef coming and doing all this stuff. That's not my thing. And something just happened to my computer. Can you guys see me still?
Yep, we
can see you and hear you.
Something just happened on my computer. Anyway, so we did a Colorado Cookout, and the idea is that I kind of want to have my glampers come and be self-sufficient as possible, like a self check-in and things like that. I'll come by. I even say this in my communications with them, that we want to give them their space, and we don't want to be overwhelming to them. Like, hey, how you doing and stuff like that. I get turned off of that when I travel that way, and the host is too friendly. So we make that clear up front so that the expectation is they can come and they can just stay. Colorado Cookout, we would provide them at 4:00 a cooler with some hamburgers or buffalo burgers or something like that, and then some chips and some toppings, buns and stuff, and they can grill their own food. And that was a thing we were providing for $50, and a number of people came up with it. That became, we don't do that so much anymore, but that was an option. Actually, we make our own wine. So this is something we give our glampers with. This is glamping. This is my first tent that I told you about that I put up. This is my hunting tent.
I just want to point out that I talked to Chris about marketing like a year ago, and he promised me a bottle of wine. I never got it. So
I probably did. I promise. Make a lot of promises with this wine. I will gladly give you one. This is Glamping Cabernet made in Monument, Colorado. And it says, cheers to your outdoor experience. And so I gift this to everybody who comes. And then I also invite them to a wine tasting. I got to tell you guys, that is the most enjoyable thing we do in our whole glamping operation, is when a guest says, hey, we would like to pay for a wine tasting. And they pay us $30. And we show up with 2 bottles of homemade wine, which I think is a great deal. And we could probably charge more. And then we sit down and we, the cue of getting to know them is hey, ask us about our wine making, and then they usually are very curious, and they ask about how we make it and what we do and stuff, and that just lends to a conversation, and then we sit and we drink for an hour, sometimes 2. There's been times our longest was 4 hours. We sat there, and then we kept pulling the wine out of the cellar and just having a great time with these guests who were paying for the experience, and it was, you see how that's kind of a backdoor to getting to know our glampers, showing up and demanding that we get to know them. That was really nice. And the people who leave, especially with their wine tasting, they leave and they feel like they're friends. They will come back. They're going to repeat. They're going to come. They're going to recommend us to all their friends. I think that adds to the kind of the snowball effect of the success of Monument Glamping. Is that we get a lot of what I call staycationers, and you know what those are. They're people from where I'm at. I'm right in between Denver and Colorado Springs, and people just busting out of their apartment building and want to have an outdoor experience. So they come and we that's awesome. That's awesome. Now it's not the chef making the homemade three-course meal for them,
but it doesn't need to be, right? And I think we've talked about this on the show before. And I don't think I need to tell this to anybody on this show, right? But for the people who are listening, maybe, and this is why we keep talking and bringing it up, right? It's the experience. It doesn't matter if it's the ritzy, high-end $3,000 a night experience with the Michelin star chef, or the $300 experience with the Colorado Cookout, or the wine tasting. It's all about setting expectations. What are you going to offer your guests? Who's your target market? Make sure you're reaching those people, telling them exactly what you want, getting the guests into your glamping resort that are your targeted guests, so they're expecting and appreciative of the experience you're providing, and that's it. It's all about the experience, whether that's a field in Iceland or a $3,000 escape in Montana or whatever it is, right?
I think it goes back to the hosted experience. Chris, what you're describing there, what you're selling is yourself.
Yep.
You're providing something that's a unique experience. Now, there may be an underlying piece in there, right? Like obviously they have to like wine to start, or that's the mechanism that we're facilitating this whole experience, right? But that's not what they're paying for. they're not paying for the wine. They're paying for the time. They're paying for you as a host to sit down and there's as much, you know, storytelling and entertainment and jokes and recommendations. You know, I can go and for $250 get a night at the Embassy Suites that has an amazing bar downstairs that I can drink, you know, crappy Cabernet at $12 to $16 a glass for as long as I want that night. And maybe if I get a good bartender, they'll chat me up a little bit while I'm there. So when we look at, you know, what's the spend for what's the deliverable, if it's just accommodations, if it's just a meal, you know, there's an equivalency there. So why do people seek out glamping instead? They're searching for that hosted experience, that connection with a proprietor, a person that's sitting down and talking to them and getting to know them. You know, what do you guys have planned tomorrow? Oh, we thought we'd head up to this place. Oh, it's really cool. You know, you should go check that out. I know the owners have been friends. You know, let me call ahead and I'll tell them you're coming, you know, to expect you guys. Like, that's the differentiator between a hosted glamping experience and, you know, hospitality.
Yeah, and I don't think I disagree with you. I mean, I will always choose that hosted, not necessarily glamping all the time, right? It depends on my needs and where I'm going. But I always choose that boutique, smaller experience if I can over a corporate chain, unless they're upgrading me to a suite and Marriott, which is a whole different story. But anyway, but I will always try to choose that, right? I think the only difference for us in Iceland specifically, why we chose a hotel, is because it's few and far between to find a restaurant too. So when you go to these glamping sites, like they're literally, I'm talking about 4 set up in the middle of a field. You have to go grocery shopping and cook your own food, and it's 45 minutes away from the nearest town, right? And so it's not the same as glamping over here. So,
yeah, Connor, do you want to weigh in on the F&B wildcard factor when it comes to glamping?
Yeah, it's been something that we've put a lot of effort into in looking into the data, and it's the two most, looking across all the data that we've gathered across 250 business glamping locations, which includes 700 different unit types. We track whether the units have a private bathroom or not, and how many people they sleep, and what the unit type is, and the location, and all these different things. And what we found was that having private bathrooms in the unit and whether there was F&B on the property are the biggest things from a data perspective that make the biggest difference in rate. And we actually even noticed that F&B did make a bigger difference. And I think it's important to distinguish what exactly that means. And I think when we see a restaurant level quality at a glamping resort, and the units have private bathrooms, we're almost always seeing ADR above $500, which is pretty awesome. But you have to have both. And this might be they're serving 2 or 3 prepared meals a day. And there might even be like a waiter or a server. So they're pretty high quality. And then I think the other thing is having some sort of food solution on property is going to be super important, because most of the time glamping is super remote, and it's really difficult if you're coming out somewhere for 2 nights to shop, to like cook on a grill in an area that you don't know, to put stuff in the fridge, and you end up with waste, and it's a lot of logistics. So your guests, food, water, shelter, right? So if they're coming to your site, knowing that they have a simple solution to get their meals, and I think that's something that they're willing to pay for, and it adds more revenue to your business as well. So it's not easy, but it's super important.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see what the future of, again, it's probably just getting started in Iceland specifically, right? But I could see food and beverage options there at $1,500, $2,000 a night easily because of the surrounding options. But like, I don't know, have any of you ever been to Iceland?
Not yet, just Norway 3 times.
Hey!
Every time I have an opportunity to go to Iceland, I'm like, yeah, but I could go back to Norway.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with Norway. Nobody's saying Iceland's better or worse. But that was one of the other things with us. If you haven't been to Iceland, most of the restaurants don't open until like 11:30 in the morning. Yeah. So if you don't have food and beverage on your glamping or breakfast in your hotel, you're kind of out of luck. You're going to have to wait to eat.
I would be really curious to hear from Chris. Chris, do you have any thoughts on that? Like, obviously, you've sat down and had a lot of great conversations with your guests. Do you guys offer? I know you mentioned you do the barbecue thing. What's the F&B solution there, and what are you seeing firsthand?
Well, I would say it's something we just can't, or we don't want to provide F&B. I mean, we will. Fair. The more we looked into it, that would be hard. I would have to partner up with maybe a vendor in town, and we're only 2 miles from town, so we could do that. But that would take some effort to provide that. The people who did buy the Colorado Cookout, they were people who were, like in Iceland or something. They just didn't want to go out and shop. They didn't want to go out to eat either. They were maybe showing up. They just, hey, having dinner right there on the porch, the patio, and the grill's right there, so I could just grill up the meal that the Jeub family made for them.
Which I think is perfect for your audience, as you mentioned, escaping Denver and Colorado Springs, getting out of their apartment for the weekend. They don't want to cook. Right.
And they wouldn't mind, and they don't mind doing something on the grill. So we did s'more packs too for a while, where we would put a $15 s'more, marshmallow and graham crackers and chocolate together for them.
Connor looks like he wants to try to talk you out of whatever you're saying. I'm not.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, did you stop doing the s'mores pack, and did you stop doing the Colorado Cookout, and why?
The Colorado Cookout it's just labor intensive, and so we still provide it on Hip Camp. So we have it as an extra on Hip Camp, but we don't really advertise it in our book. We advertise the wine tastings, and if we aren't able to make our schedules line up, which sometimes happens, we will just gift them with 2 bottles of wine and say, here you go. And they're for $30. They like that. This homemade wine is really very, very good. And then the Colorado Cookout was just labor intensive. That's why, and it depended on what we had in the freezer too. That's what we had, and I don't know if permitting would be an issue on that one. That is something we didn't explore. With wine, we did get permitted with a B&B license, so we can gift our people with wine, and we wouldn't get in trouble with the state on that, because it is alcohol. We do have a non-alcoholic version. We have homemade kombucha, so we make our own homemade kombucha, and our family just makes that. So we drink kombucha.
I'll take some of that too, please.
Yeah, okay. And then so that's something we gift them too. So if they're not, we say wine or kombucha. And sometimes we show up with both, and we taste it and get to know each other. So
I know that.
Well, I was going to say there's different entry levels, and I've found this in all the glamping community or glamping discussion groups that I'm in. There's just different levels to enter into. I feel like I'm a level 2 or maybe 3 because I have 2 properties.
But don't you feel like, as the glamping guy, you should be sinking a couple $1 million in here and leading the industry on your YouTube channel, Chris?
Someday.
I don't want to put you on the spot.
My days are numbered. So level 1 would be the tent in your backyard type of person where I started out. Level 2 is really more than one unit. You're starting to treat it like a business. Level 3 would be more like multi-properties, and I feel like I'm just starting that with 2 properties. We do have a 3rd one in the making, because now the whole thing with the Colorado Cookout and the wine tastings, that's not scalable. That's dependent on me. So I want a property manager to come into the 2nd property and bring their food and beverage solvent solution to that. And so somehow, some way, they will come and they go, hey, this is my skill. And Wendy Jeub make wine and kombucha, and that's what we do. we are wine drinkers and we're kombucha drinkers. So we will gift our guests with that. The property owner that we still got some ideas on. Or the property manager for next year, they might bring I don't know what though, homemade bread or something, which might be a thing that they will gift their guests somehow coming in. It's not a campsite with like 40 units. It will be this will be a glamp ground with 12 units on this property. And so what can we do to make it a host experience so that people get to know their hosts as much as they want to get to know them, without overwhelming the hosts or overwhelming the guests?
Well, this is interesting to me, Connor and Zach, if you weigh in on this, right? What is there a middle ground here between full food and beverage, no food and beverage, and maybe even like a curated partner with 3 restaurants that are really nice, and you come and take that food and put it in a nice
Oh
presentation.
yeah, there's so many ideas
Yeah.
in middle there. Yeah.
What I would say is, I think you're absolutely right. I think that this is one area in the industry where we're actually starting to see a lot of inroads being made, a lot of innovation. We're seeing companies like Outdoor Kitchen that are coming to the space saying we want to help operators specifically solve their F&B problem or their challenges on their glamp site, and focusing on this industry. I think, just like you described, Chris, where in this case you're making the wine, you're producing the wine, you're leading the discussion. It's very labor intensive. Now there's value to it, and it's part of what you're creating and selling to your guests. But you brought up the perfect point: is how do we scale that? How do we increase that? And maybe that becomes partnering with a winery that they're doing that anyway. And then seeing, hey, maybe on Fridays and Saturdays, could we just contract this with you and get one of your employees to come out and lead this in a larger group setting, where instead of you being direct one-on-one with just one single guest and leading this 2-hour-long experience, instead it becomes a communal thing, and you're bringing in a partner from outside that already does that. It's part of their business and facilitates it. We've seen glamping operators that say, hey, there's this thing I'd like to offer that's a value add and an additional guest experience. The one example I would give is massage, where they said, we're going to create a space for it. We're going to build a platform. We're going to put up a tent, and we have this local person that does massage therapy, and we're going to add that as an add-on to any of our guests that while they're staying with us, they can book the massage. But then that booking is sourcing out to another platform for that partner that they use. And then when they get those appointments, those bookings through a unique link, they know, okay, this one is out at the glamp site. And so they'll stack 2 or 3 appointments up, and they're just going to come out and provide that service, that experience on the property. But it offloads it from the operator having to do all of those things. I think there's also in this industry, it's somewhat unique that certainly those premium guest experiences, yes, people are demanding the service, the staff, everything that comes along with that. But I think that it doesn't have to, it's not a binary decision. It doesn't have to be that extreme or nothing. I think, your concept of like the meal kits, I think that's brilliant. There's certainly some basic meals and really even some things that can create a high-end guest experience that don't have to be super labor intensive. My family, we tell my kids all the time that they're growing up spoiled rotten, because one of their favorite dinner meals to request is a charcuterie board. And my wife is an incredible cook, and she does it
I don't want to
right.
agree with anybody, Zach, but maybe it's possible.
We've got 5-6 kinds of cheese on there, and olives and crackers and prosciutto and salamis and all that. But that's something that you could make up 10 or 15 of those ahead of time. They get covered, and really even. And I think I've said this before on the show, but I think part of that perceived value, right? When you make it optional, when you add all these add-on things, it can start to feel like, the hotel, like, God, if I take this out of the minibar, they're going to charge me $10 for 2 ounces, right? And so I think there's a certain threshold of things that you just want to provide. Just like you said, we include the wine. You're not charging them extra for the wine. That's our gift, right? And if you got to raise your ADR by $10 a night to cover whatever that is that you're giving them, do it. Because the perception of value is, God, when we showed up, they had this little basket on all these snacks. They had bottles of water. We got a bottle of wine. Like, you've created the perception of a higher value, even though it's built into your ADR, your price. But I think certainly for some of those things, having those optional add-ons that is something that you can prepare ahead of time, or work with a local restaurant to prepare ahead of time, that you can easily stock and just, before they check in, pop it in the mini fridge, and it's there waiting for them, right? They have to unwrap it and they've got snacks or they've got something easy that they can munch on that night. The next step up, I would say, is those offsite partnerships where, like you said, you're 2 miles from town, right? So pick your 3 restaurants that you want to partner with, have the menus in the rooms where people can look and see, well, where do we want to go? And have an online booking or offer that, hey, we'll call in a reservation. Yeah, it's in your app, right? Like, and we're a connected world today. People in an area like that where you've got restaurants 2 miles away, they can DoorDash something out to their site if they really want it. So I think in some cases, some instances, depending on your location and what's around you, there's not as much of a prevalent need to create that. And I think, what Connor was getting at with that point of how important this is, if you're in a location where you don't have it 2 miles down the road, now we have to create it on the site. We have to have more of those options available, or we have to include it in the stay because it is important. It's part of that overall guest experience and keeping people comfortable.
All right, so we've got solved, right? We were running over on time, so we got to wrap it up a little bit. But we've got this solved. We got high-end solved. We got mid-tier solved. And then low-end, I think Vidar was talking about throwing axes. We could just put some free-range chickens on some land and have them go hunt their dinner, right? If they want to save enough money. So we're just, again, MC Fireside Chats has solved the world's problems during an hour of the show. So anybody else have any final thoughts before we head off for the...
Yeah, I wanted to piggyback because I think we've identified a market idea here that the market is demanding this. I got to follow
chickens, or are you going to say something else?
No, it's just locally. There's a local brewery. They make skier's pea is what they call it. They're riding off of skiing. This is skiing country, and they make a beer called skier's pea. It's the funniest thing. People love popping it open. Say, "Oh, I'm drinking skier's pea," and they drink it. It's kind of funny. But they're a local brewery. And they dropped off just the other day a bunch of brochures. They want me to put it in the glamping sites. And the thought is that, the Chamber of Commerce loves me to death. I mean, they just can't get enough of Monument Glamping, bringing people into Monument, Colorado, and visiting the restaurants and the breweries and the wine, everything here. So I guess I've got what I'm going to do. This is my commitment to all of you guys. I'm making a vow tonight to follow 30 through
seconds
with that,
to make
really
your commitment.
leverage those
Go ahead.
local businesses. Okay, I'm going to follow through with that and connect with these local businesses and tie them to my glamping operation, and because I think that's a scalable route.
The other thing is, Chris, it's a partnership, right? So it's not just you funneling your guests to these businesses. We've seen arrangements where you say, you know what, I'd love to do that. Can you get me a coupon for 10% off for all of our guests? And it's going to have Monument Glamping on it, so that even on the back end, in their side, they're collecting those coupons. They're coming back and saying, gosh, you know what? We saw 45 tables this month that came from, we got 45 coupons in. And then, you can ask
10% off coupons for me and left on my doorstep, so that she wants to make that connection herself as a business owner.
Yeah. Right, and I think you as a business owner can get something on the back end of that too. Whether that's, hey, we'll kick you $100 gift card once a month, or we'll give you certain X amount of dollars for each referral that actually pans out for us, right?
All right. I appreciate you all. I'd love to talk to you for another hour. I'm sure Connor and Zach and Vidar and Chris at least have something important to do. I don't, of course. But I really appreciate it. It was a great discussion. Like, I think we maybe need to have another discussion about food and beverage in the future, because there's all kinds of different things we could talk about there and expand on that topic. But any final parting thoughts before we go?
Yeah, having me back on, Brian. I'd love to keep talking with you. You guys are geniuses in the field, so I really enjoy.
They are. Don't include me in that bundle.
Oh, you are, Brian. Talk yourself down.
I just go to conferences and I talk to people and I retain. That's all.
Brian's the sticky glue that holds us all together.
Oh yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Brian, I would say
cap off of when you're a kid. That's who I am.
I would say I think it'd be great to dedicate an episode 1 month to F&B. And I've even got some folks I think that would be good guests to have on for that.
Yeah, we had John from Outbound Kitchens on way before he apparently got big. So, but I'm
we
super excited
recommend
to have the conversation. All right, well, thank you so much. I appreciate you for being on another episode of MC Fireside Chats, our glamping episode. Especially appreciate Vidar, super late over there in the UK. Vidar, where can they check out and learn more about Nordic Glamping?
You can check my website, so that's nordicglamping.co.uk, or check it out on Facebook or Instagram. That's all right.
Awesome. Well, I wish you much success. I'm sure that, well, hopefully someone will come and buy some of your amazing hand good quality.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to sell some to you guys over there. That would be cool.
I mean, I feel like it's definitely a unique proposition. So hopefully. All right. So thank you, Chris, for being a special guest as always. Connor and Zach for coming back for another episode. And we will see you next week for our Campground Outdoor Focus episode. Till then, take care, guys. Appreciate you.
Cool.
All right. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks, Brian.
Bye. Thanks.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of MC Fireside Chats with your host, Brian Searl. Have a suggestion for a show idea? Want your campground or company in a future episode? Email us at hello@moderncampground.com. Get your daily dose of news from moderncampground.com. And be sure to join us next week for more insights into the fascinating world of outdoor hospitality.